Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live from Las Vegas. So good morning. It's 10 a.m. here. Sorry that we're just getting started just a tiny bit late. It's raining here, storming, and I guess that's probably a good sign. There's nothing more beautiful than a storm in the desert. So we are broadcasting live. We're streaming on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Vin Armani, and also on the Facebook page in live Facebook streaming of our content partner, Activist Post. And I want to say thank you very much to them. They can be reached at facebook.com/Activist Post. If you have not already liked them, please go and do that. That way our show, which is going to be airing every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, will go straight into your Facebook feed, and you'll be able to watch it in the morning or afternoon or evening as it may be. So I'm here, and I would like to introduce to you all my, I guess if I'm like the Captain Kirk of this thing, then I guess he's my Mr. Sulu. Christian Reyes, my good friend, longtime business partner, and now show producer, co-host.
Thank you very much, Vin. It's a true honor to be here today, and I'm super excited. And I was thinking last night, like, the timing could not be better.
I agree. I agree.
It's crazy.
I mean, what we have to talk about is, I think, and I'm hoping, you know, my hope for this show from the beginning was that we would be able to do something different, but something very timely, right? Mm-hmm. So while there are some other internet broadcasts, and thankfully there are people who have been pioneers in doing this, you know, for me personally, you know, I don't fall on the political spectrum of left or right.
Right.
You know, I consider myself an anarchist, voluntarist, a libertarian in the classical sense of the word, you know, I guess in the sense of the word that maybe the founding fathers would be. I'm obviously not a big guy for government. I think some people right. know that about me. And so I wanted to do a show, and I had been wanting to do a show for a long time that came at the issues of the world in that way. And it's something you and I have talked about for hours and hours and hours over the years, right? And so it was wonderful when, you know, I just done a series of videos, and then the folks at Activist Post came and contacted me, and they were like, would you like to do some podcasting? But I think this is way beyond, right?
Right.
And as an anarchist, as a voluntarist, now I guess I would call myself an agorist, and I guess we'll get into all of those things in this show and what that all means. Fundamentally, though, without any labels, I mean, I'm somebody who believes in, very much so, in the golden rule. You know, I mean, you've known me for quite a while. I've known you. I think it's one reason why we get along, that we're not into violently coercing people into doing things. We're not into tricking people into doing things.
Absolutely.
You know, we're into establishing long-term relationships built on trust. Yep. You know what I mean? Where we don't have to lie to someone to get what we want. Where it can be mutually beneficial.
You just give as much value as you possibly can and see where it ends up from there. You know, and that's kind of how me and you have been working this whole time, and it's been awesome. So
I mean, I've got to say it is a complete honor, and I'm so glad that you came on to do this. So let's let me talk to the people a little bit about what they can expect, and then we'll pop back in and be discussing throughout, because we've got some great things that we're covering today. So as I said, we have a fantastic content partner. Actually, this show would not be happening if it weren't for the people at Activist Post. Activistpost.com, you can follow them on Twitter at Activist Post. You could follow them on Facebook. Some of you might be watching on Facebook, facebook.com/Activist Post. If you have not checked out their content, I've been following them for quite a while and reading their content, sharing their content since before they contacted me. So it was really serendipitous, but that's how I would like to approach this show. On this show, we're going to be covering current events, news, also hopefully getting into some philosophical discussions with some fantastic guests that we have. Today in particular, very happy, and this will be in the second hour of our 2-hour show. I have coming on to discuss the case of Ross Ulbricht, founder of the Silk Road Marketplace. We have his mother, Lyn Ulbricht. You may not know about this case. I think it's one of the most interesting and intriguing legal cases out there. Fundamentally, and we will dig deeper into this as we bring on Lynn, I want her to talk about this as much as possible and explain it. Fundamentally, there's a young man, Ross Ulbricht, who was sentenced to life in federal prison for building a website. No violent crime, basically building a libertarian eBay based in Bitcoin, an anonymous market living in an area of the internet called the dark web. We're going to get into all of this. It's incredibly fascinating. Incredibly fascinating. Christian, are you aware of this story at all?
I know a little bit about it, but I'm really excited to hear what Lynn has to say. I did some research on it, and it was fascinating. You know, just seeing what happened with that and how it was corrupted. You know?
It's so amazing the level of government corruption in this whole thing. I mean, first off, the simple idea that someone can be sentenced to, and a young person can be sentenced with no criminal record, right? Can be sentenced to life in prison for building a website.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It blows my mind, and it really is a travesty of, I think, a travesty of the criminal justice system.
Right. And you're watching, you know, many people are becoming awake of what's happening right now with the politics and all that. And you're watching this stuff and you're like, okay, why aren't these people in prison? You know?
Right. There's somebody running for office right now where we have proof of crimes being committed. And some of them, and potentially maybe even, I don't want to get myself, I don't want to get suicided by getting shot in the back of the head, you know what I mean? But some of these crimes, violent crimes.
Yeah.
And yet, someone starting a marketplace for basically the exchange of anything. That's, yes, this is a drug case. This is a corruption case. This is there are elements of murder for hire in this case, but yet it's not covered in the media.
Right.
And I think that that's the place for this show. And I hope that what we can do is that we can inspire other people.
Yeah, and spread the truth.
But also, a level of empowerment. I mean, we built this setup, this studio, ourselves.
Right.
Just the two of us. We spent the last week putting this thing together.
Yeah, it was pretty cool too.
and we're running it, just the two of us. And we're able to reach out to the entire world. And that's new. That's something completely new.
And that's the power of social media, and also what's at your fingertips. With your phone, you can communicate to so many different people just like that.
Yeah.
And
to everyone, really. Fundamentally, because who doesn't have a phone capable? I don't want to say Western society, but in modern society, and we're talking about any city dweller, and most people, if they have electricity, have a phone with an internet connection. They're saying in India, I found this fascinating. In India, basically, they are not building out land-based internet because there's just no use. Almost everybody in India who has an internet connection, and it's an incredibly wired country for sort of the income level and whatnot. Almost everybody, something like 80% of all the data transfer on the internet in India is on mobile phones.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They just skipped right over. And every single one of those people right now can be tuning into us, broadcasting live out of Las Vegas. And it's within the grasp, that kind of reach and of any message, messages of liberty, of messages of freedom, because those are the ones that carry, of messages of respect for other people, of messages of peace. Those are the things that will carry. And I hope that others will see what it is that we're doing and want to move forward themselves.
Also, too, success. What you can do on your phone. And I heard a story about this guy that I contacted through social media recently.
Okay.
And he was homeless.
Okay.
And he saw another guy that was standing around on the street, and the guy was like super happy, and he went up to him and he started asking him questions. Why are you so happy all the time? He's like, the money's falling from the sky. And the guy's like, what? He's like, I'll let you know as soon as you're ready. So like maybe 2 or 3 days later, the guy gave him he came up with like $10, and he's like, I'm ready. So the guy's like, I don't want your money. He's like, here's $40. Go to the library and open up a PayPal account and open up, and start yourself a little business from your phone. And then he started giving him step by step. Well, fast forward into the future, the guy's like, he made $300,000 in less than a year.
Off of his phone.
Yeah, and starting with his mind.
Well, it is, it's the information economy, right? That's what we're living in. So you had the agricultural revolution. That was this first boom, and then you had the industrial revolution. Yeah. And then you had this information revolution, the internet revolution, and we are just, you think about how each one of those changed history. You had the agricultural revolution. Without the agricultural revolution, without farming, there's no cities, there's no nations, there's no quote unquote civilization. Without the industrial revolution, you don't have a worldwide global economy. And think about how many people were lifted out of poverty. Think about how many places that were formerly uninhabitable were living in one. Without air conditioning. I mean, yes, there were people here without air conditioning, but there's a million in this valley?
Yeah.
or more, and there's 75 million people every year, I think it's actually more than that come to Las Vegas. The middle of the desert.
Yeah, just
in the middle of the summer when it's 120 degrees, no water around. And not only are people surviving, but you can get fresh seafood.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? How does the Industrial Revolution change the world? And then how does this internet revolution, this information explosion change the world? But you think, what's required?
Right. And also, too, you have to get the right information. So, you look on social media, who knows what to believe now?
Right.
I mean, it's coming from all different directions.
Right.
And you're like, okay, what the hell? Like, what is the truth? What is going on? I want to know the truth. I just want to live in peace, and I want to be happy, and I want to know the truth. And is it this or is it that? And that's kind of where it gets all congested.
And I think that this is the opportunity. It's this type of curation. Activist Post has been fantastic in terms of them breaking down the news. That's what I want to be a part of on this show. So those of you who are out there, if there are stories, concerns, things that you want to see analyzed, we are not here to throw propaganda at you from one way or the other. We're not trying to do anything with this show except make you more free by viewing it than you were before. Because freedom is a mindset. And as Christian and I have talked about many, many times, when you see yourself as a free person, when you see your thoughts, your body, your actions as being valuable, as having meaning, then the way that you decide to live your life and what you demand from other people in terms of how they treat you changes greatly. So if we're going to express change and be change in the world, then this is the way to do it. So let's do that. Let's get into talking about some of the stories These have been curated for us by the folks at Activist Post. Go follow them, Twitter at Activist Post. You'll get these stories and a bunch of others.
Really great content.
Yes, they've become my sort of go-to daily news starting point. Stuff that you just don't see anywhere else. Okay, let's see our first story, and it's an important one. So yesterday, WikiLeaks put out this statement saying, "We'll release a statement tomorrow about Assange. Our editor is safe and still in full command, despite reduced communications with staff." And you may or may not know, Julian Assange, the editor of WikiLeaks, has been holed up for several years now in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And recently, his internet connection was cut. What's important about this story is that Julian Assange has had no other means of communication besides visits from this single apartment in the Ecuadorian embassy besides the internet. If you saw the WikiLeaks movie, which is a little bit of the truth and, of course, a little bit of opinion and propaganda, you know that Julian Assange is a critical aspect of WikiLeaks. For a long time, WikiLeaks was only Julian Assange. There was no one else. He's obviously a very skilled hacker. His background, I believe he went by the handle Mendax and was very, very well known in the hacking community before he started WikiLeaks. So today we do get some update on Julian Assange. As you know, WikiLeaks has been influential in spreading information about Hillary Clinton, her dealings with the Clinton Foundation, the way that she has manipulated a lot of the electoral process. They've been accused of being helped and funded by Russia, which I think can be very easily dismissed. Their statement today reads as follows. On Tuesday, the government of Ecuador issued a statement saying that it had decided to not permit Mr. Assange to use the government of Ecuador's internet connection during the U.S. election, citing its policy of non-interference, in quotes. Ecuador's statement also clarified that it does not seek to interfere with WikiLeaks' journalistic work and that it would continue to protect Mr. Assange's asylum rights. Mr. Assange has asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where the United Nations has ruled that he has been unlawfully deprived of liberty by the United Kingdom and the Kingdom of Sweden for the last 6 years. He has not been charged. It is the government of Ecuador's prerogative to decide how to best guard against the misinterpretation of its policies by media groups or states, whilst ensuring that it protects Mr. Assange's human rights. WikiLeaks is a global, high-volume publisher that publishes on average 1 million documents and associated analyses a year. WikiLeaks publishes its journalistic work from large data centers based in France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Norway, among others. Most WikiLeaks staff and lawyers reside in the EU or the US and have not been disrupted. WikiLeaks has never published from jurisdiction of Ecuador and has no plans to do so. Similarly, Mr. Assange does not transmit US election-related documents from the embassy. WikiLeaks is entirely funded by its readers, book and film sales. Its publications are the result of its significant investigative and technological capacities. WikiLeaks has a perfect decade-long record for publishing only true documents. It has many thousands of sources, but does not engage in collaborations with states. Mr. Assange has not endorsed any candidate, although he was happy to speak at the Greens Convention due to Dr. Jill Stein's position on whistleblowers, peace, and war. So, 10 years, millions of documents, every single one is true. And so what does that say about this election that we are entering into? Furthermore, we have leaks basically stating that the Clinton campaign has committed crimes. And We have emails that probably should be leaked, 30,000 of which, that we know have been destroyed in contravention of a congressional subpoena. The Congress sent a subpoena to Hillary Clinton saying we would like to see the emails that she had kept on a private server. And she had technicians delete 30,000 of them while the subpoena was out there. And yet Julian Assange, publishing true documents, has been first cut off from the world physically by being basically trapped in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, unable to leave for fear of his life. And now leaks have come out through WikiLeaks saying that he was very right to be afraid for his life because Hillary Clinton had asked when she was Secretary of State, while in a meeting, why can't we just drone this guy? And now he's been cut off from the rest of the world virtually. It doesn't stop WikiLeaks from publishing. It just stops him from speaking. There's a reason why the freedom of speech is the very first right that the founders of the United States of America put into the Bill of Rights. Without freedom of speech, there is no freedom politically whatsoever. The first thing that any tyrant does is silence their opponents. And right now, Julian Assange is the opponent of one individual, and he has been silenced. Have you been on this WikiLeaks thing, Christian? Have you been following this?
Yeah, I've been watching it pretty close, and it's craziness. The main thing was I was watching Julian Assange speak last night, and I'm like, the courage that you have to have as an individual to go up against the system like that. And
That's crazy.
here's what really, really triggered in my mind. The only way that's possible is through the truth.
Agreed. Wow, that's powerful. Mm-hmm. Well, they say the truth shall set you free.
Right.
And I mean, I think we have reached a place of the power of the individual. But as with all things, with the power of the individual, it's always through the truth. It's always through the truth. Because the truth carries on its own. You know, I mean, WikiLeaks there's no bells and whistles to it. It's just documents. That's it. So, yeah, man, it's incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. Speaking of hacking, so, you know, this whole thing, it's been blamed on, I loved how Hillary Clinton always deflects on this, talks about the emails, oh, it's Assange and Russia,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
As though, what I find interesting about this is, so the case that WikiLeaks became the most famous for was the Bradley / Chelsea Manning leak of all of the basically brutal collateral civilian killing in Iraq. The release of that to WikiLeaks, which was then picked up by the global media and covered. There have been other leaks as well, the Snowden leak. There's been many, many more. Why are people believing that there's some state actor hacking documents when every other time it's been leaked by somebody inside? It's called WikiLeaks, not WikiHacks.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly, yeah.
It's pretty crazy the level of propaganda that's out there. In terms of hacks, though, Friday we had a big one. I want to talk about this one. Go ahead and throw to story 2, please. So, if you on Friday were trying to get onto Twitter, and you're in the United States, you probably noticed that you couldn't get on. Twitter, Reddit, SoundCloud, Spotify, for a while Amazon Web Services, which hosts Netflix. You had a bunch of major sites completely unreachable via what is called a DDoS attack, distributed denial of service attack. This is a really scary story. It wasn't just one attack. It was actually one, and then it stopped, and then there was a second one that was even more powerful, that prevented even more people from being able to reach these sites. Why this is, it's terrifying. This is one of the most terrifying stories out there. And the reason why it's terrifying is the company that was attacked is a company called Dyn. They host the DNS servers. To basically, in layman's terms, what the DNS servers around the world do is when you type in a name, so let's say vinarmani.com, let's say twitter.com, when you type in a domain name, it routes it to an IP address, which is basically like a phone number of a server. So if you don't have the DNS, then you can't type twitter.com and go to it. And on most of these large sites, they really utilize DNS to shuffle between servers that are all around the world, sort of mirroring. So when you go to twitter.com, you're hitting a different computer if you're in LA, a different server if you're in LA, a different server if you're in New York, a different server if you're in London, because if it was the other way around, the traffic would be insane, and also the amount of time that it would take for the signal to get there and back. I mean, you're traveling across, it's not all satellite beaming up and down. I mean, this is actual cable that this data is traveling across. So it's a very complex system. If one of these DNS systems goes down, then it leads to the situation that we have. What's terrifying about this is what they found out what made the DDoS attack. And essentially what had happened was a bunch of Internet of Things devices, these connected, web-connected devices. So these are things like nanny cams, security cameras, smart power meters, little things connected in your home. It could be a smart TV. It could be they have those little picture frames. All of these little tchotchkes, things that you can go and buy at the Sharper Image or whatnot that you can control from your phone. Many of these ship with standard default passwords that are known to the hacking community. And when they show up on the network, they can basically be owned. They can be hacked. You wouldn't even know it's there. So software had been installed on all of these machines, millions of machines. This could have been installed by one person. It could have been installed by a government. It could be multiple people having control of a single machine. And essentially what they do is they turn them all on to hit page refresh at the same time. A simple, brutal attack. And no way to know that these things are infected or to take it off. Because here's the thing, whatever took down Twitter is still installed on every single one of those machines. And although the companies may have found a workaround this time, this is something that can happen again and again and again. As Christian, what really got me about this story is how close it is, and it ties right back into WikiLeaks, is how close it is to the election, number one. And what it means for someone to be able to take down Twitter. You know, we saw countries like Egypt when they had their revolution. I believe a similar thing happened in Iran when they were having some uprising, and Turkey recently did it too, where they take down the internet to prevent people from organizing on Twitter.
Right.
The idea that someone out there has the capability to take down Twitter, Netflix. You were telling me you were affected by it.
Right. So I was researching at the time, and I was looking for some stuff on Pinterest, and I'm like typing in. And at first, I thought it was our internet connection here in the studio, and I was like, "What's going on?" And then I mentioned it to you that day, and you're like, "Dude, there was an attack," And then what went through my mind as I was thinking about that was the transfer of power with the internet that just happened a couple weeks ago, or about a week and a half ago.
Oh, right, where they moved from American to like an international body for the name servers. And it was actually for, I believe it was like ICANN. It was the top level domain owner, right?
Right, yeah.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, so I was like, well, maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. I didn't research that far into it, but
I mean, I think it's simpler than that. Like it was a pretty simple type of hack. I mean, from the age of 15, I was hacking. We used to essentially, there were these little programs called war dialers. Things would be connected to the internet, and I mean, it could be anything from a bulletin board system to a Taco Bell. This is a prime. I'll give you a prime example. It was well known in hacker circles that Taco Bell's sort of login system, their time card system, was internet attached, and that every single one of them had the same login and password. So you would set up a little program called a war dialer that would just start dialing numbers one by one by one, and then it would log in and it would log the sort of handshake. And there was a particular handshake that said Taco Bell. And then so like you let that run for a few days on your machine, set it up on a separate phone line. I was taking up my parents' phone line at the time. They were not very happy about that. I was a teenager. And every once in a while you'd get a Taco Bell. And you could log right in and you could change the days that they had worked. You could change all of this type of stuff. This is essentially that. But you imagine, how many people have security cameras? I mean, they sell them anywhere. You go to Best Buy and they have the security camera that you can, or the nanny cam, where you can log in with your phone, right? And you log in and
it's everywhere now.
Yeah, if that's connected, what people don't understand is all of these devices, they are little, they're little computers.
Right.
Right? Most of them little Linux computers, and you can log in and you could do anything that you could do on a computer, including you can use it to go and hit somebody else's website. And essentially what it looks like is, I know they used to do these sorts of protests back in the day. Like, I don't know if they're legal. I think it's maybe been made illegal. This certainly, a DDoS attack is illegal. But they used to do these protests of companies where, let's say, or I'll give you a better example, because this is something that a lot of people have experienced. Radio stations, when they have contests, call in, be caller number, whatever.
Right.
Usually you call the radio station. Radio station may have 20 lines, right? But you call the radio station when one of these contests is going on, busy signal, right? You have to keep calling back because the busy signal. That's fundamentally what a DDoS attack is. You just make so many people hit Twitter on a particular server, and it only has so many connections available, and it only has so much bandwidth. So basically what happens is you've got a million of these little bots out there hitting it. And it prevents you and I from getting through the same way as when there's not anything at the radio station, we get right through, the normal traffic. You just increase the traffic.
Yeah, I was definitely curious on how that worked and what happened with that.
It's scary because it could literally happen again at any time. It could be turned back on, and you best believe that was a test.
Yeah.
The next one, who knows how long it's going to last. They were testing to see, okay, what are the defenses that are going to happen? So I wouldn't be surprised if November 8th, come election day, Twitter goes down.
Interesting couple weeks, that's for sure.
Related back to WikiLeaks, though. WikiLeaks does most of their distribution of information. The first place that it gets distributed is on Twitter. And also that same thing took Reddit down, which is another big place for moving this type of information and these types of conversations happening. So that going down on, say, election day, I mean, I think we all know who it would help. it would only help one candidate, and it's the one who's wanting to silence everybody's free speech. Because there is one candidate, one of the major candidates, who's been very successful by using Twitter. That's been his whole thing. So it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes. If this, my fear coming up, and I think Hillary Clinton is going to be the next president. And I've called her a war president. I think that they're really gunning for war. I think that the media is absolutely gunning for war.
They started seeding it already.
That's their MO. And it's crazy how ridiculous the stories are that are coming out. This next one, story 3, don't go to it quite yet. I just want to preface this. On this show, we're going to be doing quite a bit of propaganda deconstruction. So what I'm going to do is, Christian, why don't you go ahead and play this?
Okay.
Make sure that you start talking to Lyn Ulbricht, who is going to be coming on, mother of Ross Ulbricht. She's going to be coming on in about 15 minutes. Get her all queued up. I'll play this, and let's. Why don't you handle her, and I'll talk to these people for a little while.
Navy fired missiles at radar sites used by the Iranian-backed forces. Those same sites targeted U.S. Navy warships twice in 4 days.
Those who might threaten U.S. forces should recognize that we will not tolerate threats to our people. We will respond if our forces come under fire.
The U.S. is not saying if there is intelligence showing direct Iranian involvement in the attempted attacks. Tehran announced its own deployment of warships to the region. The Pentagon making clear it's ready for more action.
Should we see a repeat, we will be prepared to take appropriate action again at the appropriate time.
If there is further provocation, U.S. officials say the next round of potential targets could include rebel missile sites and small boats serving as spotters. This time, officials think the Yemeni missiles were fairly old, but had been outfitted with highly lethal warheads, the kind Al-Qaeda and Iran know how to make.
It'd be a very serious charge if the Iranians were in any way complicit in conducting the attacks against the U.S. destroyer.
Okay. This story is incredibly wild, and it shows what's coming. It shows what the media has become. So I want to break this whole thing down. The story that CNN is covering here is basically stating that the U.S. launched missiles at, and I can assume destroyed, radar installations inside Yemen. Now, Yemen is experiencing a civil war. You have the Sunni, basically, faction that is being backed by the government of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is doing airstrikes into Yemen, attacking Shiite Houthis. I believe that Yemen is a majority Shiite country. Saudi Arabia, though, which is on its border, does not want the Houthis in control. But they are doing a damn good job of keeping control of that country. So, the story is coming from the U.S. government and coming from CNN. CNN is over. It's one of the reasons why I'm wanting to do this, is that it just does not even make any sense what they're saying. The U.S. fires missiles, destroys radar installations in the sovereign country of Yemen. First off, according to the United Nations, that's a war crime. That's an act of war. It's against the UN Charter. You cannot bomb and attack a sovereign nation, only in self-defense. The U.S. is saying it's in self-defense because this particular ship had been targeted by radar, and CNN is reporting that it's these older style rockets that had been fired. Now, that's a few days ago. Here's what we've got. Only a few days later, the story has changed. According to Reuters, the Pentagon declined to say whether the USS Mason had been targeted at all by inbound missiles from Yemen, and said that a review was underway to determine what really happened. Quote, We are still assessing the situation. There are still some aspects to this that we are trying to clarify for ourselves, given the threat, the potential threat to our people. Pentagon spokesman Peter Cook told a news briefing.
God, I hate Skype.
So there were no
Hello.
missiles.
Can you hear
There
me?
were no missiles.
Oh,
Radar was attacked in Yemen.
okay.
That's a war crime.
I'm not even talking.
And yet, 2 + 2 = 5. I've been saying for quite a while that we're reaching sort of 1984, the Orwell book. We're reaching sort of 1984 style propaganda, where really black is white and true is false. And anybody is able to see. This is not even being hidden. There's no way to hide it. But yet, from these initial stories, CNN isn't walking back off this. CNN isn't apologizing. CNN wants war. Their ratings
I'm not gonna listen to this. What's the deal?
go up insanely during war. I'm going to give you the prime example. The last time that we went to war, real war, 2013, invasion of Iraq. We went in March 2013. In February, CNN had a 0.7 rating. That means somewhere around like 900,000 people watching at any given time during the day. Fox News had a 1.1 rating. The next month, when we invaded, CNN's rating went from a 0.7 to a 6.3. Fox News' rating went from a 1.1 to a 7.1.
Oh,
Just from war.
okay, fine.
Now, there's a problem. There's a conflict of interest there. When you're supposed to be reporting to the people, and hopefully as the media, you would think that the media's job is not to drive a people towards war, because the people don't want war. The media's job is to report on what's going on, so hopefully the people can prevent war. And yet, that's not what we're seeing. Once this election is over and we have the new president in, which I think we're all pretty sure that it's going to be Hillary Clinton. I don't think that, again, that the media is going to allow someone who does not want war or who is not fully gung-ho about going to war and starting a war potentially with Russia, potentially with China. There are a lot of flashpoints right now, and we're going to cover them all in the coming weeks. The media is not going to allow a person who doesn't want war to get into the Oval Office. So these are the stories that we're going to be covering. Hopefully something can be done. I don't know if anything can be done to prevent it, but at least something can be done to wake people up. And this might be the first time that we get some real reporting from war zones. I mean, there's internet everywhere. There's still internet in Aleppo, which is crazy to me. Bombed out, and there's still internet in certain places. So we'll be covering this, we'll be covering other stories, and we will be tearing apart the propaganda of what has now become not a news organization, but a propaganda machine. Christian, are we, how are we doing with Lynn? Do we have her? No? We got 5 minutes? Okay. So then let's do this. Let's go ahead and I thought I had seen her pop up. No? Okay, got it. All right. So let's go ahead and let's do the Apple story.
Apple, the company who revolutionized the personal computer and music industries, is now looking to transform the way we pay for our goods and services with hopes of eliminating cash altogether. CEO Tim Cook told the Japanese news service Nikkei, "We would like to be a catalyst for taking cash out of the system. we don't think the consumer particularly likes cash. Apple has already been making waves in the world of money, releasing Apple Pay in 2014, their digital payment service allowing users to store their credit cards, debit cards, and gift cards within the service in order to pay with their devices at checkout. The service, first launched in 2014, has recruited a number of major banks to participate in its service over the past 2 years, and recently announced a partnership with Felica, a mobile payment standard in Japan, allowing them to quickly roll out the service in that country. Despite these advancements, a path to a cash-free world remains unclear. Apple Pay is predicated on plastic and is not compatible with the more than 1 billion Android users around the world, leaving paper currency the world over safe for now.
All right. Apple. We're live, folks. We're working out some of the early technical glitches. We've got Lynn Ulbricht about to come on in just a minute. But let's talk about this. Apple wants to eliminate paper money. I love this quote. The consumer, Tim Cook is really going to say, we've seen that the consumer doesn't like cash. This is very interesting to me. For the past 6 years now, a lot of people know me from my television show on Showtime, Gigolos, and I'm sure that there are some people watching right now who are Gigolos fans. And I am one of the best-known straight male escorts in the world. It's been a wonderful journey for me and a fun one, but it is a cash business. And before that, I spent 10 years in software development and was very much a technology guy and had gone off of cash. Now being back on cash for the last 6 years, I tell you what, I love cash. And the people that I know who are big on cash love cash. And Las Vegas is a cash town. And there are a lot of advantages to cash. I'll tell you what, the consumer loves cash. And businesses love cash. And you can't tell me that a server at a restaurant doesn't love cash. Christian, if you want to... you have spent many years as a mixologist, bartender, right? Performer, entertainer. Is there anyone in the service industry who does not like cash? Is Tim Cook right here?
No, cash is king, obviously, and especially in my years as a bartender, going home with cash every night it's everything,
right?
And I just don't understand the mindset. Okay, you want to eliminate? Are you kidding me? No, it's just, I don't know. It's crazy to me.
Well, this upcoming story and interview that we have, I think, really goes to this. There are some aspects of cash where obviously the consumer loves cash, but governments hate cash.
Yeah.
Governments have
always... They can't track it.
They can't track it, and they can't tax it. And that's the key. Mm-hmm. And it opens up certain black and gray markets. I mean, living in LA, growing up in Southern California, the Korean grocer who was cash only, you know what that's all about. Right? You know what that's all about, and everybody knows what that's all about. And if you imagine all of those, and that would be a gray market because obviously they have all the permitting and all of that. It's not a black market. I'm sure the dispensaries as well, mm-hmm. Are doing a lot of business in cash because people are traditionally used to buying marijuana with cash. They're used to buying drugs with cash. I think that there are quite a few people who are weed smokers, mm-hmm. either in the medical marijuana states or in the legal recreational states, who would prefer not to have a dispensary listed on their bank account statement, or who would prefer to, if there's some married people or somebody doing something while they're on a business trip or something, that they would prefer that didn't show up on their statement, that level of anonymity. And the thing is, that is a level of freedom.
It's freedom.
That if it's taken away, if those voluntary interactions, person-to-person voluntary interactions are removed, the path to tyranny is really, really clear. If I can't operate in cash anymore, and you can shut down whatever my bank account sort of transfer is, it's over. If you can't buy, I mean, that's
Ultimate control.
dude, it's biblical.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because isn't that in Revelations, right? Even back that far, you're talking about somebody recognizing that the worst thing that could happen in terms of tyranny on a mythological level is an inability to buy and sell.
Mm-hmm.
This is a crazy monk living on an island in exile, probably eating hallucinogenic mushrooms, who even in that state is like, yeah, the absolute worst thing that could happen is that markets aren't free. Think about that, man.
Yeah, it's a mind bender. And
think about that.
That just gets rid of all your freedom. And, you know, with that level of freedom, with the cash, comes a level of responsibility as well.
Of course.
You know, and you have to manage your cash and also be clean. You know, you don't want to do anything that's,
right,
you know, against the law. But the freedom needs to be protected.
I agree. And look, I don't necessarily think that it needs to be cash. You know, I'm a big supporter of Bitcoin. I have been about Bitcoin for a very long time. I never kept a very high balance. I never did much mining. But when it jumped in that span, you know, I had gotten in and, you know, started filling up my wallet and playing around developing when it was probably at about 15. And when it went to 1,000, dude, I got a lot of Amazon gift cards and I bought a lot of stuff. I had a very nice Christmas, you know. But I truly believe there are three technologies, and there will be three technologies that we're going to talk about a lot in this show. Aquaponics being one, you know, food security, huge. People being able to eat. We see it in Venezuela, right? That's a way to control the population. Again, back to 1984, control of food, huge. Then cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and the others that have come up, that non-state controlled, global, international, non-counterfeitable, anonymous. I mean, that's cash, and being able to move that all around the world in this technological society, to me, so huge for freedom. The third one, mesh networks.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
Mesh networks. The fact that we all have in our phones we have basically Wi-Fi routers and we have 4G routers, and that with the right software and the hardware tweaked a little bit, we don't even need wires anymore. Everybody's phone can throw connections over and over and over the internet. So we'll get into all of those. Today, this one is big on Bitcoin, and it's also big on anonymity and free markets for sure, the epitome of free markets. So we have Lyn Ulbricht coming on. Right after this break, we are going to have an interview of what I think is one of the most interesting and important cases, maybe in the legal history of the United States, but certainly in recent history, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Stay tuned. We will be back right after this break with Lyn Ulbricht.
So far, no response.
Go back to, hello, Lynn.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me? Are we
I
getting,
can hear you. I
her?
don't see you. Are you on my? Do you see me?
1 second. We have her audio. Christian,
Is this just audio or is this a video also?
USB TR2 and mute the other one. Can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go. Sorry, this is our
Is
first.
this just an audio or is this also video?
No, you are there on video. Are you able to see us right now?
No. Well, let me see if I can move Skype or something. Oh, there I am. I see myself.
You see us?
There I am.
Do you see me as well?
Yeah. Yeah, that's way better.
You
yeah,
see us both?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So, Lynn, thank you for coming on. If I may, I'll just by way of introduction, you're the mother of the creator of the original Silk Road Market, Ross Ulbricht. And since his arrest in 2013, Lynn has been working tirelessly to defend her son. In May 2015, Ross, an Eagle Scout with no priors, was sentenced to life in prison. Oral arguments for his appeal begin October 6th. Lynn Ulbricht, thank you very much for joining us today on our
My
first
pleasure.
inaugural show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, Christian and I were talking earlier. I don't know if you were able to hear. We were talking about free markets as being very, very important. And when the folks at Activist Post first suggested that we do this interview, I, of course, jumped at the chance. I've been following Ross's story. I think it's an absolute travesty of justice. One of the things that I was not aware of, and I just, if you wouldn't mind me reading, they actually forwarded me the Silk Road Charter. I believe this is written by Ross himself, his vision of what he had created. And I think before we get into this, if I could just read this, I think it just really sets the stage.
Okay.
It says, Silk Road is a global enterprise whose purpose is to empower people to live as free individuals. We provide systems and platforms that allow our customers to defend their basic human rights and pursue their own ends, provided those ends do not infringe on the rights of others. Our mission is to have voluntary interaction between individuals be the foundation of human civilization. There's much more to it, and I hope that as people go on that they read this, but in reading that, I knew that it had been a travesty of justice, but in reading that, I really got the sense that Ross is a political prisoner.
Exactly. Oh, I agree.
I mean, that is a libertarian manifesto. That's the type of thing that could have been written by a Ludwig von Mises or by a Milton Friedman. If these are people who are celebrated as philosophers, he put it into practice.
Well, allegedly, we don't know exactly his role, but yes, I can tell you why I came around to thinking he was a political prisoner.
Please.
Because initially I thought, well, maybe that's too hyperbolic to say that. I mean, until I saw the sentences of the other Silk Road defendants who were convicted. The biggest drug dealer on Silk Road got 10 years, Jan Sloan. So, was convicted of selling mountains of drugs.
Right.
The biggest heroin and cocaine dealer on Silk Road got 5 years. One of the top administrators of Silk Road during the height of the sales, he's out free, and I'm glad, but he got 17 months time served. And then Ross gets double life plus 40 years without parole for all nonviolent charges.
Okay, so let me set the stage for the people, because I'm sure that we have some viewers out there who are not completely familiar with Silk Road and with the entire case, and I hope that we can get into that. I'd like to tell the whole story. So, which of course I would like you to tell the story, but in terms of background, I actually visited the Silk Road. I mean, my background is as a software developer, and I had heard about this sort of through, the sort of community of developers. And I think it was probably about 2012, it feels like, where I visited the Silk Road on what's, I guess, known as the dark web in the Tor relays. Difficult to get to. You kind of had to know somebody who knew somebody who had a web address that could take you to this site. And what I saw when I got there was basically a completely open market that was anonymous, and there were a lot of things for sale. There weren't yes, there were drugs, and I was actually surprised at the caliber. There were things there, and I mean, I am a huge drug use advocate. I'm very public about that, particularly, MDMA, psychedelics. I do ayahuasca ceremonies. I believe that there's always been a place in human society for consciousness altering substances, and I think there's been great art that's been made under the influence, and people have had great revelations. And it's something that now we're seeing in this country, libertarians pushing to decriminalize, now it's legalized, but I would like to see a decriminalization of drugs. I think a lot of people will. I think a lot of people are going to go to the polling stations in just a few weeks, and they're going to vote to legalize the types of drugs that were available on Silk Road, and they're going to vote to legalize them. So if you could give us a little background about the timeline of Silk Road. I know that it's not for sure that Ross was 100% involved in everything that was going on. Can you give us some background in terms of a timeline and Ross's involvement with this before the case actually became a case?
Mm-hmm. Well, unlike you, I never did go on Silk Road.
Fair enough.
So it's what I read and then was informed of when he was arrested. From what I understand, the site started in 2011 and was closed down in 2013. And of course, since then, there's been a proliferation of similar markets that are 10 times the size, and just enormous, without the ideals and without the restrictions, such as there were some restrictions like no child pornography, no assassinations or violence, no stolen property. So there were restrictions, but it was pretty much an open market, and it was vendor and buyer driven. And it's fairly much between vendors and buyers, from what I understand. Like I said, I've never been on it. So that's what it was, and that was not actually allowed to be mentioned at trial. Nothing but drugs, and even certain drugs, were allowed to be mentioned at trial to the jury. For instance, from what I understand, the biggest amount of sales, for at least most of the time, were small amounts of marijuana. Marijuana was barely mentioned at the trial. Certainly, in addition, you mentioned the political, which we can get back to, but that's another thing. Ross's libertarian views were not allowed to be mentioned at trial. Basically, what was allowed to be told to the jury was a narrative constructed by the prosecution of a ruthless kingpin who would do anything in his power to defend his empire. And it was a drug empire, according to them only, and that he was controlling it. And that's what the jury heard. And from what I understand, that is a distortion, and it certainly doesn't give the full picture.
I mean, I in visiting the site myself and with a development background, and as I looked around the site and saw how it operated, I didn't make a purchase, but I did understand what the process was in terms of making a purchase. My impression was that it was similar to any sort of online marketplace like an eBay or something like that, so that if I go and I buy, some computer gear on eBay, eBay is not selling me the computer gear. They're facilitating, perhaps, but eBay may not even be aware that that particular thing is even for sale. And if you have an open marketplace and I'm assuming that it's automated in this case, it seems like a very difficult case to make. What really struck me in this entire case is looking at Ross and looking at how old is he?
He's 32 now. He was
32.
29 when he was arrested.
So here's a young man in his 20s arrested. I look at him and I see the guys who used to sit across from me in development teams. Like that's who I'm looking at, and I know
Except
these guys.
He doesn't have the programming skills. He wasn't trained in computer programming, so he probably didn't have their programming skills.
Right. So
which is another big question.
So to look at someone with these views, it's absolutely heartbreaking. Can you tell us a little bit about Ross? You as his mother. First, and the one thing that I want to say.
I really want to, before we get into
that.
Yes,
please tell us about Ross.
About the political part, and I really want to talk about that and complete what I was thinking, because it's important for people to realize that it's not just the disparity of the sentencing, which made it quite obvious that it wasn't about drugs. And in fact, the judge in her sentencing goes, "You're no better than a common drug dealer." And Cody Wilson tweeted, he goes, "Well, why don't you sentence him as one then?" It was because it's political, because Ross was a political threat, or they considered Ross. They need an example, but what was a political threat, I think, this is my opinion from observing the whole thing, is Tor and Bitcoin and an alternate currency were a threat and had to be stopped. Chuck Schumer was behind it, behind the investigation, and a force behind this whole thing. He was on the banking committee.
Right.
It was just very plain to me. And by the way, the judge was recommended by Chuck Schumer to Obama for a nomination, and Preet Bharara, the head of the Southern District and the main prosecutor on this, was Chuck Schumer's special counsel for many years. That's political. But in addition, the judge was very political in the sentencing. She brought up Ross's political beliefs and said she wasn't sure he'd given them up yet. And so because of that, he has to have life in prison.
You're saying his libertarian political beliefs? She was saying that he should have given those up?
She was saying she wasn't sure he had. She quoted things she referred to the site's philosophy. She referred to quotes, not necessarily by Ross or even DPR, but just quotes calling the government oppressive, calling the government the enemy, and this was called out by her as troubling and dangerous. Now, I think we're allowed to say that.
I think that's what this country was founded on, as a matter of fact.
And I think actually Thomas Jefferson said it's our duty if we
Yes,
think
he
that.
did. Yes, he did.
So I say my opinion is that she's troubling and dangerous.
Yes.
She took an oath to uphold the First Amendment and free speech and political speech, and instead she used Ross's, DPR's, Silk Road, whatever, the political speech involved in that and the political view as a bolster for a double life sentence for all nonviolent charges. There were no violent charges.
Yeah, what were the charges that exactly Ross was put up on?
Yeah, well, I can't say exactly, but basically, first of all, to be clear, there were no murder for hire charges at all. They were not charged.
Okay.
And that has been something that has been decimated all over the place. And there were no murder for hire charges at trial, but yet the prosecution was allowed to talk about them to the jury.
So the prosecution was discussing murder for hire, which is a crime, but this crime was something that was never charged.
Never charged.
That seems very improper to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And then it was used at the sentencing as well, even though it was never charged, never proven, never convicted. Mm-hmm. So he was convicted by an ill-informed jury of narcotics trafficking, money laundering, computer hacking. Not that he hacked, not that he laundered money, but because there was hacking software on the site, which goes back to your point, which is transferred intent. Is eBay, is Amazon responsible, or is FedEx responsible for the transportation of illegal pharmaceuticals using FedEx, which they were indicted criminally by the United States government for, because somebody used FedEx to send something they didn't think should be legal. Now, this is called transferred intent. It expands the criminal umbrella tremendously.
Sure.
As you can imagine.
Yes,
it makes
of
me
course.
responsible not only for myself, but what somebody else does. And of course, as you say, it could put a chill on the internet, because people then who wants to be held responsible for what's on their site, they don't even always know.
Yes.
Sometimes they do though.
Sure.
But they're not the one. In any case, another charge was the continuing criminal enterprise, or known as the kingpin charge, which is putting Ross in the same category as, like, these really violent kingpins like Pablo Escobar, who was responsible supposedly, convicted of 3,000 murders, 300 assassinations. Right. He's a kingpin, okay?
Right.
They're saying Ross is a kingpin. Now, the kingpin charge requires that the prosecution actually names 5 people the kingpin directly supervised, organized, and, controlled. They didn't name one. They didn't name one actual person.
Wow.
And they still got this life sentence, because it has its own life sentence, kingpin. And then the narcotics trafficking has its own life sentence. She gave him the maximum possible. It's like, I believe if she could have given him the death penalty, she would have, because she said, I want to give you the maximum I possibly can to make you an example so other people won't do it, which of course has not worked at all. In fact, it's like I said,
Sure.
There's a proliferation of sites.
Well, of course, they just get better at hiding themselves, right? This is not, that actually, having a site that had some restrictions, I think any libertarian, and there are a great many libertarians watching this, anarchists, voluntarists, agorists, people who believe in free markets, people who believe in human rights, we have a right to make voluntary exchanges. We have and someone who's facilitating that. I mean, hell, why don't you go ahead and put the U.S. government up on charges for producing currency that's used in, that facilitates it just as much, right?
Well,
if you're
actually,
exchanging
that's the
currency.
point.
So,
That's the point. Well, and I'll just to interject there. There was debate on the forums about, well, we should be able to have child porn because or whatever, it falls into that category, which I guess there's an argument for. The Silk Road administration said, oh, I don't care.
right.
We don't care, whoever,
Right.
because there's lots of people who think there's many DPRs. We don't care. We're not doing that on this site, which Amazon or anybody else has the right to do as well. But I think it also says something about the standards, and some people might laugh at that because of the drug thing, but there wasn't children involved. There wasn't violence involved. No one was forcing anyone to do anything. And I need to be clear, I'm not defending Silk Road or drug use. I'm not here to do that. But I do think that it's important to know that what you read earlier, the statement, what's to argue with that?
Exactly. It's really hard to argue with. Yeah, really hard to argue with. I want to get into. I think where this case gets very interesting, but also unfortunately where the major media piece fell off, was after the sentencing. I guess during the trial as well, with some of the impropriety that happened with the particular FBI agents involved, but also post-trial, things that came out, and now I know that the appeal has begun. If you could take us through some of the government charging this young man, but yet can you take us through some of the things that the government agents themselves did in the course of this that either did show up in trial, didn't show up in trial, but that you're bringing up now in the appeal?
Absolutely. Well, it's a big part of the appeal is that there were two government agents at the core of the Maryland investigation, Carmark Force and Sean Bridges, who are now in prison for stealing over $1 million. But to me, government agents stole money.
This was in Bitcoin, right? They stole. So they had seized Bitcoin that was under the Silk Road account, and then they had
from people
pilfered this.
Well, and abused their power. But also, what's even more interesting to me is that these guys were high-level computer experts. That's why they were on the case.
Right.
And in fact, Sean Bridges, one of them, was working for the NSA at the time. So I assume that gives him all the tools. He is an expert in the darknet. He also has a history of framing people, and but the defense wasn't even informed of his existence till after trial. That particular agent, even though the government knew about him. The other agent, Carl Force, was also adept at computers, and they had high-level admin access. So they could what one journalist called keys to the kingdom. They pretty much could do whatever they wanted. They could change passwords. They could act as DPR or other people. They used aliases. They could manipulate, edit, change posts both on the forum and the marketplace. They had access to bank accounts, keys, PIN numbers. I mean, they could do pretty much anything they wanted for many, many months on there. And yet this was not allowed to be known to the jury, and the jury's being presented with evidence, quote unquote, that these guys had access to.
Wait, can we back this up? I just want to be really clear on this. Are you telling me that there was a period of time when federal agents had control of Silk Road, this supposed criminal enterprise, and were doing things? We know that they were stealing. We know this, but we're operating the site, or things were happening,
or cooperating. I don't know that they had total control. I don't think but they had the ability to to tamper extensively, to delete things, to add things, to do whatever they wanted, pretty much. And to act as DPR, by the way.
And this was never brought up. This was never brought up in the trial.
It wasn't permitted by the court to be mentioned to the jury at all. The defense fought it pre-trial. And
Wow.
I remember the morning, it was Christmas morning, and Ross's lawyer called me and he said, man, they will not let us talk about, he couldn't tell me what, because I don't have attorney-client privilege at the time. He said, it's really, I can't believe they're not going to let us talk about this, and it's appealable, but it's really not, it's terrible that they're not going to, and he fought it, and the government said, well, you know, if you talk about these agents at trial, then, you know, this will jeopardize our investigation. So the defense goes, fine, well, wait, let's put off the trial till you finish.
Right.
And no. The court's like, we got to do it now, and basically preclude the evidence. Then later it comes out that the agents already knew they were under investigation, that it wasn't going to jeopardize anything at all. And yet the jury didn't even know they existed.
Wow.
This is, you know, the Brady rule is very well established law that says you cannot suppress evidence that is favorable to a defendant.
Right.
And it happened over and over again in that trial.
Wow.
So it's not just about Ross, and it's not just about Silk Road, because fair trials are a pillar of our liberty here. If we don't have fair trials, well, you know, every totalitarian regime has show trials. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
if our trials are you know, not real,
Yes.
are not fair, it's very alarming.
Well, I mean, that is
Plus,
the bedrock.
one other quick thing about
Yes,
it.
please.
Well, there's so many, but this comes to mind. Almost all the evidence, and it goes back to this, it was digital in the trial. It was chats, screenshots, you know, just digital material. And even a mortgage company won't take a screenshot of a bank statement because they
That's
know how
true.
easily faked it is.
Yes.
Many experts have said totally vulnerable to being tampered with, changed. And this is what the government used as their evidence. And I'm like, really? And it's like, that puts us all in peril as well. Other courts have thrown it out. But this court has a lower standard of evidence than a mortgage company.
This is
That's basically
absolutely
what it boils down to.
It's absolutely chilling. I mean, I'm really the
chilling.
feeling that I get in the pit of my stomach about this case, and especially sitting here with you. I think anyone who really stops and thinks and puts themselves in a situation and imagines themselves in this situation as someone who really is making a political stand, who really is standing for something, and then that the government is willing and is showing that they're willing to come down, because they couldn't win a fair trial.
Apparently, because they
Obviously.
didn't have one. If they did, what they would have, if they could have thought they won, they would have.
They
They
gone
wouldn't
with
have
the fair
fought
trial.
tooth and nail to
Right.
have the jury not know. And that's not the only example; it's just the biggest one. But yeah, no. Yeah.
So let's talk about the appeal, because although this first fair trial, the next step in the justice system that we're supposed to have, that's supposed to be a fair justice system, is supposed to be an appeal. And so this was very recent that the appeal began. And can
Well,
you
no,
talk
it
to us?
began in January. Yeah,
Okay.
it's been going on a little while.
Okay, so can you talk to us about where it stands, what you're appealing, and how things are looking?
Sure. And a lot of the whole appeal brief that was submitted by the defense is on freeross.org under documents under the case. So you could, if people do want to read it, it's long. It's, in fact, they had to get permission to have it be that length, and they said they could have put a whole lot more in it because there were so many violations at this trial. It's you know, a lot. But it was submitted in January by the defense. It was replied to by the government, and I think in May, and then they've gone back and forth a couple of times. And then recently, just recently, October 6th is what's called oral arguments, where the three appellate judges and the two sides, the prosecution and the defense, are questioned for only 10 minutes each. And it went over a little bit in each case, but not much. They don't have a lot of time to make their points, to answer the questions, and then the judges will deliberate now. And we don't know how long that'll take. That could be very soon. It could be next year. We just don't know. They have other cases they're they have to write up their opinions and stuff like that. So that's where we are. The appeal is done.
Okay.
Except for the part for the judges, yes. And there's three main parts to the appeal,
Okay.
and there's a whole lot to it because obviously there's 170 pages. But there's the preclusion of the evidence, not only the two corrupt agents, but other things. But mainly them. There is the use of unconstitutional warrants for Ross's laptop and social media accounts. This has also been backed up. The EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, and the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers wrote letters submitted as part of the appeal saying this is unconstitutional in our opinion. And what it is they used what's called general warrants, which the Fourth Amendment requires particularity. You have to say, let's say you're seizing a file cabinet. You can't seize the whole file cabinet. You have to say what file.
Right.
And if you want another file, you got to go get another warrant.
Right.
And this is our founders' protection against government intrusion, giving us privacy, protecting us from that. It's one of the reasons they fought the Revolutionary Wars, because the British used general warrants.
Right.
It's a big part of why they wrote the Fourth Amendment. Okay. The government is saying in this case that, well, no, it's not protected because it's digital. It's a laptop. It's not papers like they say in the Constitution. It's not a physical file cabinet. It's your laptop, and that doesn't count. And I'm like, really? It's a laptop or computer is, as we know, a file cabinet on steroids, right?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
It's like
That's
unbelievable.
precisely what it
Gateway
is.
to all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
And so the big question now, and through this case, is one of several that are before the courts, is do we give up our privacy in the digital age because we don't use paper? Or
It's an interesting
physical
question.
file cabinets?
It's an interesting
It's
question.
a very important question. It's
Absolutely.
like, which is why EFF signed on. They're very much about that, because we're losing our freedoms, as you know, and talked about, and our rights and our protections very, very fast. And these cases, these high-profile cases, matter because they trickle down into lower cases, and it becomes kind of the way it is. It's precedent. And precedent's being set with this case. So it's not, I really try to get people to realize, you know what, it's not just about my son, or a drug website or whatever. It's about our rights and being used, as they use the drug war to do, as they use many things to do, taking away our rights and trampling on them and justifying it and distracting with the sensationalism. And meanwhile, this is happening.
It's incredibly scary. I think that I know that a lot of people are watching this right now, and if for those who it's their first time being exposed to this case, it really should scare them. It should seriously scare them because it's a
motivate them to help us. Hopefully, we need help. We're one family.
So if people want to help, I know that there's a legal process here, but you are at the forefront of helping Ross. How can people help you? What can they do?
Yeah, and we have a lot of things on freeross.org. Of course, it's ridiculously expensive, punitively expensive to fight for justice in this country, which is another way I think the government crushes you. They're so rich and powerful, it's limitless. But when you're just a family with some friends, it's ruinous, really. And so, of course, we always need money. But I know a lot of people don't always have money to give all the time, although that we really do need it. If you go to our shop at Amazon through our homepage, we get a little bit. There's an art game based on art that Ross drew in prison that you can play for very little and help us out that way. We have a store. We're having an event on December 4th where a lot of libertarians and other people interested in this case are coming forward. We're calling it a free Rossathon because it's going to go on for 8 hours, and we're going to have different guest speakers and talk about the issues. And the goal is to raise, so it's like $14,000 for just one bill, not a lawyer bill. It's the bill to print and bind the appellate briefs for the judges to read and send them a digital copy.
Wow.
$14,000.
Wow.
And the kind of thing that you're up against. And then there's experts, and so it's all this stuff. So that is specifically about wanting to, raise that money as a goal. But really, we also want to raise awareness, and we're going to have a lot of great people there's a lot of great people who've already confirmed who are going to be talking about different issues. This case is so complex, and it goes over so many different areas that we're going to have a real variety, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to have that, and we'll be announcing it and everything. Free Rossathon, yeah.
And they can get this information at freeross.org.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's there.
Fantastic.
And also just, share. There's a place where you can sign up to be a volunteer, because hey, I'm older. I'm not tech person. I didn't grow up with it. I'm like struggling constantly to learn, and I have some help for sure. But we always need help. There's so much to do there. If people want to volunteer, also sharing on social media to change the narrative into like what you're doing. You're helping tremendously, just letting me speak about the bigger issues here that really matter, because you get it.
Well, thank you. It's an important case.
It is. Frankly, I find that not all, but many of the mainstream media either don't care or they don't get it.
Right.
And they don't talk about it. They'd rather talk about the uncharged crime of murder for hire. They'd rather talk about drug kingpin, whatever. And I think they know just as well as we do that Ross is not dangerous. If he walked out of there tomorrow, no one would be scared.
Right.
Mm-hmm. He's not a threat to anyone. And so it's just, yeah. And I sort of see this as an opportunity because of what I've seen myself firsthand. With the violations. I was shocked, and I wasn't a particular big fan of big government or anything, but I was just like, wow, I can't believe they operate like this. I was just shocked. And our lawyer was like, yeah, they do. Yeah, that's what they do. And so I really hope that this is going to be a spotlight on some of that, because it's not just Ross. He's not unique, as you know.
Right.
And I have an opportunity because it's high profile and all of that, but there's people that I know from the prison. And people I know that have been victimized, and it's not American. It's not the American tradition to be treating our citizens like that. To be putting more Americans in cages than any other country in the history of the world, in the world right now.
That's right.
This is making money off of people. To me, is human trafficking. What else are you going to call it?
Agreed. I agree 100%. This is an important case. It's an important cause for me. I think, I tell people all the time that the only thing that you need to know what the problem with the government is to actually have to interact with the government when you're the more your property or your freedom or your health is on the line, the more you understand that there is a problem. And I have great empathy for Ross, particularly for you, especially. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful that you are doing this for your son. I could totally have seen myself. I was a hacker back in the day. I could totally have seen myself sitting in the same situation that he's sitting in, either by mistake or by being set up. And I'm not sure.
You're not the only person who said that.
Right, and I'm not sure that my mother would have done anything except written me letters in jail. So I really, it's really wonderful what you're doing, and it's wonderful what you're doing for sort of freedom in general.
Well, thanks. I do really hope and intend that this is going to be used for a greater good as well. And so is Ross. We do feel that, and because it is a bigger fight than just this. This happens to be a focus, but it's a way bigger fight, and it's important. I really think we're at a tipping point in history.
I agree.
And and I think that right now is and this is one battle in that fight, And you were saying he's a political prisoner. Well, he's a prisoner of war, in my opinion. The drug war, war on our freedoms. For sure. And and he's one of you guys, really, and I just call on everyone to help us. It's got to be grassroots. I don't think it's going to come from the established media or other. It's got to be grassroots, and it's important for your future You know, young.
I agree.
Most of the people are young, and it's not just young people, but you know, you've hopefully got a longer future, and it's important what you're living into. I think we are at a tipping point.
I thank you for coming on. I mean, this is our first show. I think that this is
what a privilege. Thank you.
Well, and what a powerful sort of first coming out of the gate. I'm so glad, honored that you were here, and we are going to hopefully, if you can be available to us, we would love to keep up with you. We'd love to get updates.
Okay.
This one is near and dear to my heart. So I just really want to thank you, Lynn Ulbricht. You can go to freeross.org to find out more information on how you can help Ross. They can follow you on Twitter at free_Ross, right?
Right. And we have a Facebook community page. And
Facebook.
Yeah. So, all that social media stuff I had to learn.
Get in there, follow this case, help Ross, and we will be getting back in touch with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Vin, so much. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Christian, bro. Wow.
Whoa.
Wow, bro.
There's a lot there.
What the hell, dude? It's really... Let me tell you why this is scary to me. It's scary because, you know the quote, the JFK quote where he said, if you make peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. Mm-hmm. And the libertarian revolution, small L, not the Libertarian Party, but fundamentally a libertarian revolution, the idea of freedom, is nonviolent, right? You go Gandhi, right? You go Martin Luther King. You know, I think fundamentally the founding fathers, you know, the Declaration of Independence is a letter. The Declaration of Independence isn't a bomb.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? Like, because you can't sow violent coercion and reap liberty. Mm-hmm. It has to be peaceful. And the thing is, here you have someone, and we don't know his full involvement with the site. We don't know how many people there were. But regardless, whether it's him, whether it's a number of other people, someone setting up a website, peaceful website, it has been shown and studied that here you have a situation, people buying and selling. They're figuring out ways to transport this stuff via FedEx, send it through the mail. Two people aren't meeting. There's no guns involved. There's no robbery. I mean, in the drug game, robbery is a big thing. People get killed and what do they say? Drug deal gone bad. Drug deal gone bad. Drug deal gone bad, right? Here's a way that a drug deal can never go bad, or any other kind of deal, right? Anonymous, through Bitcoin. Here you actually have a solution to all of these things where people are like, well, this is why we're fighting the drug war, because we have these drug gangs holding on to turf, blah, blah, blah. This eliminated that. Here you have actually a solution to eliminate all of those things that are considered the bad things in the drug war. When you take out the violence from the drug war, all you have left is the drugs. And we already as a society are deciding we don't really quite have the same problem. I mean, she said the vast majority was small amounts of marijuana. That's what was moving. And yet here you have us going to the polls to legalize exactly what that was. Yeah. And this guy creates a site. He's not even selling it. He's just enabling it to be sold, and he goes away for life.
It's laced with deception. Like, you could just see it with I think it really comes down to the two agents that were involved, and that's kind of what I was researching. Ross, it seems like he's very innocent. He doesn't seem like he meant to harm anybody, or his intentions were not.
I mean, I don't know meant to harm anybody or not, but he did. The question is, did he harm anyone?
Exactly.
You know, the reason why they gave these life sentences, so that the judge said why they gave these life sentences, was because somehow they found out that from these Silk Road I don't know how they established this, but what the government basically said was that there were, in the course of the several years, there were 6 overdoses from drugs that were purchased on Silk Road. But it raises this, as you said earlier, about with the freedom comes the responsibility.
Right, exactly.
Ross didn't. The one thing we know for sure is these were overdoses, and they were overdoses of heroin. Mm-hmm. Ross didn't put the needle in these people's arms and push the plunger. And Ross also did not get them addicted to heroin in the first place.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said about, are you going to blame eBay for selling, whatever, if they were selling something illegal, are you going to blame eBay for that? And the question is, no, it's not eBay. It's not their fault.
I mean, look, eBay sells combat knives. You could buy a combat knife on eBay.
There you go.
Right?
Perfect example.
If I buy a combat knife and I commit suicide with the combat knife,
it's not eBay.
Can you put eBay basically on trial and give them a life sentence? Give the head of eBay or even a worker at eBay a life sentence because I bought a hunting knife on eBay and slit my wrist?
Perfect example.
Or I killed somebody.
Yep, exactly. A lot at stake. It's really the underlying pretense of freedom in this country and all over the world, because it's laced with deception, 1, and 2, it completely annihilates our freedom.
Well, and I think what it also puts to bed, and I've said it about this election, but this trial is also an example. Lynn was so right in talking about that we're at a turning point right now. What I see is the backbone of support for this country has always been, we have free speech. We have, the Fourth Amendment against search and seizure. We have the right to a fair trial. All of these things. We have a right to elect our leaders. We elect our leaders. And it's like, boom, here we have an election where we're seeing, yes, it's fucking rigged. Yes, it's fucking rigged. It's fucking rigged. And we know that it was rigged since the time of the primaries. We know that it's been rigged. Anybody who even followed the last elections knows that there are things going on in terms of hacking of the voting machines, et cetera, voter fraud. We know that these things are happening. And not only that, you've got a media shooting out propaganda. The people are ill-informed. They couldn't even vote correctly for their own self-interest if they wanted to, because they don't know their self-interest. So we can't elect our leaders. And second off, we can't get a fair trial. Because I don't really want a fair trial. I don't care about a fair trial for a traffic ticket necessarily. But I certainly care about a fair trial when life in prison is at stake. When taking a 29-year-old at the time that he's arrested, when taking a young man in his 20s and for his political views, bringing his political views into the equation, what fucking country are we living in, man? Like, are we back in Iraq? Like, seriously, because...
Yeah, it's...
And people would be like, you're exaggerating, you're exaggerating. Really? Am I exaggerating? Is that an exaggeration for someone to get 4 life sentences for a non-violent crime and that their political views against the government are brought up in the case? Am I really over the top? Because that sounds like a tyranny to me.
It's absolute tyranny.
And this is one guy, but like she said, this is one that's in the media, but it does not necessarily mean that this is the only one. And you can be guaranteed it's not the only one.
And it'll continue to happen if it's not stopped, So this is it's a really interesting case. I learned a lot, and I was like into the story. I was just like, wow, this is, It's actually taking a little while to kind of settle in. And
I mean, you imagine yourself in that situation, right? Imagine yourself sitting in that situation. I mean, it's obviously, look, we're sitting here and we're just having a show. We're just having a show. But we're pointing out some things that the government is doing that's a problem. Now, we're not suggesting anybody be violent about it. We're suggesting that the government follow its own rules that it's set out for itself.
Exactly.
But at what point does it stop? Like, at what point have we reached the place where they start coming for us, where it's not Julian Assange's internet that's cut off, where all of a sudden we see our stream go down? And I'm not saying that that's tomorrow. And I'm not saying that the people in government right now are wanting to do that. But what I'm saying is that if people do not become aware, if people don't push back, if this is okay to do, it's not the last time that such a case is going to come up. And you know what? The next one will be even more bullshit. And the next one more bullshit.
Goes
and the
farther
next one
and
more
farther.
bullshit.
Yeah, real interesting. I know a lot of the viewers are going to sit back and really absorb that one, and I'm sure they're going to look into it, and just as I am, even farther as to what we can do to help and what we can do to protect our rights and our freedoms.
It's good, man. It's good. Well, I mean, we got a little while. Why don't I close it on out? So this has been our inaugural first show. I thank everybody who joined us. I really want to thank Lynn Ulbricht for coming on and sharing. I know how difficult this must be for her. I can only imagine being a parent in her situation and watching her son go through this, but I really just want to say again, I salute her bravery, I salute her resoluteness, and she is really doing the right thing for all of us. So please go and support. One thing that's come up during this show today is the power of the individual. From our first story of Julian Assange, this single man being singled out by the most powerful government in the world, his name being brought up time and time again in presidential debates as a danger. A single man who spent 10 years disseminating the truth, just the truth, a perfect record of truth. When truth tellers become the enemy of the state, then the state has become the enemy of everyone. You've got the power of the individual, because it could have just been an individual that took down Twitter. So on the positive and on the negative, it's a double-edged sword that as the individual grows and the individual has more power, as the individual recognizes themselves as being a free actor, it's also going to come onto you to have responsibility. That when you have knowledge and when you have power, that you take care and see yourself in that other person's position. And if you do happen to be a government employee, that maybe as you move through your day, after seeing what happened with Ross Ulbricht, that you move through your day a little more empathetic to the people on the other end, to the people dealing with government, the people that you're there and supposed to serve. And if you're an individual in the media and you're seeing this propaganda happen, wake up. If you're in the major media, say something, speak out. Risk. Because you're not just risking for yourself, you're risking for your fellow citizens. You're risking for your children and you're risking for their children. And the only thing you're risking is getting fired. Is getting fired from a deceptive organization that's leading the world towards more violence and less peace. And then there's the power of the individual and small groups like Christian and I, and like the folks at Activist Post and so many other outlets who've decided that they're going to put their pens to paper or their faces in front of the camera or behind the camera to deliver the truth. And you know what? If you're one of those people in major media and you are unable to tell the truth and you are sacrificing your principles for a paycheck, why not take your talents and spread the truth? Because you know what? The truth is powerful, and the truth is going to set you free from that situation that you're in. And as an individual, when you see cases like the case of Ross and the case of the Silk Road, put yourself in that situation and understand that it could just as easily be you. It could just as easily be you. As you become a freedom-loving person and as you demand liberty, there are factions that don't want you to have it. There are factions that are going to want to silence you. There are factions that are going to want to do everything that they can to deprive you of your property, to deprive you of your liberty, maybe to deprive you of your life. And the way that you prevent that from happening in the future is you help those who it's happening to now. You help it when it's small. And whether it's just by sharing what we've put together today, sharing the interview that we're going to put out with Lynn by itself on YouTube, or sharing stories from Activist Post or other outlets, or even just sharing a meme on Twitter that celebrates freedom. That's how you make a difference. Because freedom is a mindset. All we need to do is educate. If you make a man wise, you'll make him free. So, that's our show for today. Thank you for joining us. We will be back next Monday at 10 a.m. We've got a great guest. We've got Peter Kallman from Mises Institute, an ambassador there. He's going to talk to us. We're going to get into a little more of the political philosophy side. You're going to love this guy. Has really become a great friend of mine. Very upbeat. It won't be quite as heavy of a show. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk about a lot of freedom-related things, and we're going to share new updates on everything going on in the world. This is the right kind of propaganda. Thank you very much. Christian, thank you. And I guess we'll see everybody again next week.